Hello, it's Katie here. In today's little video, I want to share with you a project for a floral motif made using some shaped seed beads. In fact, it's the motif that you can see me wearing in this pendant. It's a nice, simple little project, doesn't take too long to make, and it's really a lot of fun with huge possibilities in terms of colouring you can use. So in the video I should have given you enough information to just follow along and make this, but I know it can be hard to take everything in when you're just watching. So I've also put together a blog post which shares a bit more information about the materials that I've used, a few links to techniques if you need any extra help there. And if all of that isn't enough, I do also sell this as a PDF tutorial. So again, the blog post will link to where you can find that if you want the extra help that will give you. Now this motif has all sorts of possibilities, and I've had a lot of fun making different projects with it already. I've got more in mind, but I've also shared some of the projects that I've turned it into, so those might also be something you'd like to try out for yourself. Anyway, without further ado, I think it's time to get the beads out. So let me show you in a bit more detail what we'll be making and then teach you exactly how to make it. Okay, today I'm going to be showing you how to make these flowers. They're made from a combination of different shaped seed beads. So we've got crescent beads in here, we've got Paisley duo beads, although this will actually also work with Zolly duo beads. We've got 4mm pearls, a 14mm Rivoli, and then it's easier to see on the back, we've also got size 15 seed beads and size 11 delica beads. So I'll go through all the materials again as we go along. But that should give you an idea of what we're making. Very pretty on the front, and as you've just seen on the back, we've got the backing of the Rivoli, which gives you scope for adding on extra beadwork, which is exactly what I've done here in this sample. Now the other thing I just want to quickly talk about before we get started is colouring. So we've got loads and loads of different options. In these two here, I've used 3 different colours of crescent beads in a single flower. And we've got Paisley duo beads and pearls. You can make them match, as I've done with this design, or you can use something that's quite contrasting, as in this variation. Then you can play around with the colouring that you use in the centres, and if you want different effect, this variation is much more similar colours. So we've got very vibrant pink around the outside and a more sort of brownish orangey colour, all same colour crescent beads for the centre. So it's a great way of using up odds and ends from your stash, and I invite you to choose colours that appeal to you, have an experiment and see what different effects you can create according to how you change the colours up. So with that in mind, I think now it's time to get started on the project itself. Okay, let's get started by talking through the materials here. Now down here I've got a 14mm Rivoli that I have already bezeled, and to create the bezel I've used size 11 delica beads and size 15 seed beads. I'm going to show you how all that's done in just a moment, but that takes care of the centre part of your flower. Now as you add the petals, you're going to need more size 11 delicas. So to help you see what I'm doing, I've used a different colour, but you can actually use the same colour that you've been using for your bezel, so that's really up to you. Then you're going to need 18 crescent beads. These are 2-holed beads, so it's worth taking a little bit of time before you begin to just check that both holes are empty on each of your beads. Next, we've got 12 Paisley duo beads. You can also use Zolly duo beads if you have those or prefer to use them. The difference is these Paisley duos, you can see they're 2-holed, you can see the shape, but they are flat on both sides. So in order to create a right and a left, you simply need to turn the beads over. And that's going to be quite important in this pattern. Now with Zolli duos, one of their sides has a raised bit. So you actually have to buy a left or a right Zolli duo bead. You can't just turn them over and change their orientation that way. So if you are going to be using Zolli duos, you need 6 left and 6 right beads. Again, being 2-holed beads, you want to take a bit of time before you start and just check that both holes are empty in each of your beads. And now lastly, you want some 4mm pearls. Now if you prefer, you could try this with 4mm crystals or fire polish beads. So that's a few options if you're looking to use up bits and pieces from your stash rather than buying anything. But in the blog post that accompanies this video, I have talked in more detail about the materials and also given you links so you can find exactly where to buy them. Now we're ready to start beading, and the first thing you're going to do is take your 14mm Rivoli, your size 11 delicas and your size 15 seed beads, and we're going to create a bezel. I'm actually going to bring in a video that I made for another project which shows you how to bezel a Rivoli using modified right angle weave. You want to make 17 units of modified right angle weave. Then the 18th unit will join your flat piece into a tube. From there, to seal the front, you're going to add 2 rows of your size 15 seed beads. And when we come round to seal the back, you're going to add 1 row of size 11 delicas and then 2 rows of size 15 seed beads. So in the next little section, I'm going to give you a series of videos with pauses just showing you the techniques used to bezel a Rivoli in that manner. So you might want to make a note of the number of units I've just told you. I'll put it up on screen again so you can see, pause and make a note, and then just follow the technique videos and create your bezeled Rivoli, and I'll come back and show you how to add the petals next. Okay, I'm going to show you how to work in modified right angle weave. I've got some nice big size 6 beads, so hopefully you'll be able to see clearly what I'm doing. And I'm using 2 colours so you can see the difference between the basic right angle weave and the modified bead that creates your peyote edge. So we start by picking up 4 beads. These would be just like you would pick up for normal right angle weave. So we're going to slide them along the thread. Just leave a tail thread you can stitch in later. And we're going to pass through all 4 beads again. So pull that up firm so that they form a circle. I'm going to go through another 3 beads and then pause and show you how to align yourself here. So if we take a little look at what I've just called a circle, think of it more like a square. So you've got a top, a bottom and 2 sides. We're coming out of the bead that sits at the top. What we're going to do is pick up one of the different coloured beads, that's our modified bead, and 3 of our right angle weave beads. Then we're going to go upwards through the bead that sits on the right hand side of your top bead. So if I pull all that up into place, you can see we've got a new little right angle weave unit, but we've got this modified bead sat sort of in the middle. So I'm going to carry on through the first of my blue beads, so that's the top of my new right angle weave unit. Pull everything up really tight. And what's happened is this modified bead, as I'm calling it, has snuggled its way in between the top beads from the 2 units. So it's ready to sit in a sort of peyote alignment. So that's the idea behind it. Let me just show you again. So we've got 1 orange bead, 3 blue beads, we're coming out of the top blue bead from the existing unit. We're going to go up through the right hand bead on that same unit, and then on through the first bead, blue bead, that we've just added. So that orange bead snuggles in again between the two units. So let's do it one more time. So we've got 1 orange, 3 blue. We're coming out of the top blue. We're going to go up through the right hand side and then continue on through that first blue bead. So we're just ignoring that orange bead. And again, 1 orange, 3 blue, up through the bead in the side, ignore that first orange bead, pass on through your second bead. So 1 orange, 3 blue, up through the bead in the side, ignore the orange bead, on through the first blue bead. And that's it. That is modified right angle weave, and we can just keep on continuing like that until we've got a strip that's as long as we need it to be. Now, if you're going to use your modified right angle weave strip to make a bezel for a rivoli or a cabochon, you're going to need to turn it from a strip into a tube. So the first step in that is to make sure you've got the right size. So I've got a little strip that I've been beading here, and I've got a little rivoli. Lay the rivoli flat, and I carefully want to edge the strip around the edge of the rivoli. It's a bit tricky because the rivoli is going to move, but you can see I've just got a little gap left that's probably about the size of 1 unit. So that tells me that that's the perfect length to now join up the ends of my strip. So let me just move that little sample out the way. I'll go back to my big beads and show you how we join the two ends of the strip. So I've got my thread exiting from that top bead in my last unit. I'm just going to fold the strip in half, and I find it easiest to sort of clamp it between my fingers, so I've got a finger between my final unit and my first unit. I'm going to pick up the 1 orange bead and 1 blue bead just as we would to start a new unit. But we've got our second blue bead in place already, so that's the end bead on the first unit, and I'm just going to pass downwards through that. I'm not going to pull everything up tight yet because I want to see where I'm going next, and that's just picking up 1 blue bead, and I can pass up through that side bead on my final unit. So that's the same manoeuvre we would have done normally when we picked up our 1 orange and 3 blue. So from here I carry on as usual through my new top blue bead, and I've actually got the strip joined. But if you just look at it, we're currently missing that orange bead. So I just want to add that in. Simply pick that up, pass through the next blue bead, and I'm actually going to go on through the following orange bead because I've been mentioning that this is creating a peyote style edge. So that's like doing the step up in the peyote stitch. So now we've got a little tube with our orange beads forming a peyote edge around the top, and that would be ready to sit around the edge of our rivoli or cabochon. Here I've got another sample, and I've actually got my little modified right angle weave peyote stitch tube sat around my cabochon. Now if we take a little look, this is quite movable at the moment, and we're going to fix the back later, but currently I'm a little concerned that the front edge doesn't come very far over the cabochon, so there's a danger that the whole thing could just pop out when I'm using it. But happily, because we've got that peyote stitch edge set up, it's really simple to just bring that front edge in so it's a little more securely placed over the cabochon. So let's take a look at how that would work. Just move that sample out the way and come back to my tube, and if you remember, we left it so that I'm exiting from one of my orange peyote stitch beads. Now I've got some new black beads here. These are actually a smaller size, so size 8, and I can use those to just stitch a peyote row. So this technically is tubular peyote, don't need to worry too much about the terms. All we're doing is picking up one black bead, passing through the next orange bead. And we want to pull everything up tight. So you can just do that by simply pulling hard on the thread. But I also like to try and clamp my thread in between two fingers. That stops it from just loosening as I'm getting my next bead ready. Now, I don't know if you can notice already, but because we're using smaller beads, this is actually starting to pull our little tube inwards. So we're managing to create a slightly smaller circle that would extend further over the edge of our cabochon, which is exactly what we wanted. But we don't have to do any fancy decreasing or anything like that. Simply using these smaller bead size will create that natural inward pull that we're after. So I'm just approaching the end of the row, and that means I have a step up. So I've got my final single black bead. I'm going through my last bead from the previous row, the orange bead, and then I'm going to step up through the first black bead that I added. Now, I might consider that that's enough to seal my cabochon exactly as I want it to, or I might want to do an extra row with the black beads or a different colour bead. It's really, the pattern will tell you what to do, or the choice is yours, but that should start sealing the front of the cabochon. So next up we'll look at what we do with the back of it. Okay, so now you've seen how to seal the front of the cabochon, let's take a look at what we do about the back. Now the first step is to just get yourself through to that back side. So I'm currently exiting from the second row of peyote. What I'm going to do is just weave back down through my beads until I get to one of my top right angle weave beads. So that's one of my blue beads. From here, if I just turn everything around, I can follow around the side and the right angle weave and then into the bottom. And here I am exiting from the underside of my little tube, and that's the side that we would actually pull in to seal around the back. So let me just move this sample out of the way a minute, and we'll take a look at each of the two samples we've been viewing before. So first, this little rivoli. You can see I've sealed the front in and that's looking lovely. Now if I just take the casing off, have a look at the side of the rivoli. It's got a really narrow edge. So when we put the casing back on and turn it over, you can see my bottom right angle weave beads are actually sticking up over the edge of my rivoli. So that is absolutely perfect. It means it's going to be super easy to seal in the back. All I need to do is add in one or two peyote rows. So I'm going to try and just do this with one peyote row. So for that reason I've used my smaller beads again. So it's exactly the same as we were sealing in the front. You're just picking up one bead and you're passing through. In this case it's the next right angle weave bead because we don't have that peyote row on the bottom of the modified right angle weave strip. But as you can see, you need to anchor the little rivoli in place in the casing as you work. And it's a bit tricky. I mean, this is a nice small rivoli, so it's pretty easy to hold. But you might find with slightly larger rivolis, they're wobbling about all over the place. And it's not until you get about halfway around your circle, your bezel, whatever you choose to call it, that it's actually going to be firm enough for you to let go. So top tip that I've discovered the hard way, if you're getting to the point where you're about to seal the back of a rivoli, make sure you've actually got beading time to do it. You don't want to put this down and pick it up in the middle of it. You want to try and do the whole thing in one go. So if you think you're going to need to run away to answer the phone or do a little chore or something, do that first, then come back and start this sealing in the back process. Right, this is getting a nice way round, and I'm making sure I pull the beads up tight each time, and as you can hopefully see, I risk moving my thumb away, that's pulling that casing in now. So we're nearly at the end of the row, and when I get to the end of the row I'm then going to assess. Oops, that is a bead that isn't going to fit my needle, so let's just discard that. Try another bead. And there we are, last bead in this row. So again I'm doing my little step up manoeuvre. And now if I pull this up tight, what I want to know is that secure enough to hold my casing? I think the Rivoli is going to stay in place, so I could risk finishing off the thread or adding the next step there. But if I feel like it's maybe a bit insecure, I'd add another peyote row around that. Okay, so we've got the bezeled Rivoli here. The first thing we're going to do is weave through it until you are exiting from one of the size 11 delicas that's along the top edge of your right angle weave bit. So if we look, we've got the 2 rows of size 15 beads, which you can see contrast very well. Then we're 1 row in of size 11 delicas, and the beads we're wanting to use for this first step are the next row in. All we're going to do is add a peyote stitch row. So you're going to pick up 1 11 delica and pass through the next bead from this row that's sitting around the edge of your Rivoli. So again, you're picking up 1 new delica, passing through the next bead from the row on the Rivoli. And this is literally all we're going to do all the way around this little cabochon. So you're going to be adding a total of 18 size 11 delicas as you work your way around the row. I'm actually not going to make you watch me stitch the entire row. I'll pause things here. You can also pause the video and get started on your row as well, and I will return in just a second to show you how the row ends and what happens next. Okay, so I've made it all the way around the row and I've just got my final bead to go in place. So that's going through the last bead that's on the edge of my Rivoli, and then I want to step up, so I'm coming out of the first of my new delicas that I've just been adding in this row. So what we're going to do now is start to add in the crescent beads. Now as we're doing this, we want to take care that we sit them the right way around. So let me show you what I mean. The first stitch is actually using the 11 delicas, and we're going to make a square stitch. So I've picked up 1 bead, my thread's coming out of the left hand side of the bead that's on my work. I'm going to enter that bead through the right hand side, and as I pull everything up, my new bead is just going to sit on top of my existing bead. I then want to continue on through my new bead. So for anyone who is familiar with square stitch, that is the thread path we've just been using. If you're not familiar with square stitch, don't get bogged down in the technical terms, just try and follow along with the thread path as I'm explaining it. Now, having added in that first 11 delica, we're going to add in the first of our crescent beads. You want it to end up sitting so the crescent shape is sort of around the outside edge of your circle. So in order to do that, you need to take care which hole you're passing through and the direction that you're passing. So I find it easiest to actually hold my bead in place as I take my needle through, then I don't get any nasty surprises. So just pull that bead down. Now to anchor it, we're going to do another square stitch. So we're picking up 111 delica, we're going through the next bead from the circle. So again, you're entering it from the right, going towards the left, pull it up tight, and then continue on, moving left to right this time, through the seed bead that you've just added. So time for the next crescent to go in. Again, just take care that you're passing through the correct hole so you end up with it sitting exactly the way around that you want. Again, we need to pick up 111 delica. We're going to pass through the next bead from the circle, moving in from right to left, pull it up tight, and at this point it is quite common for the crescent beads to flip around. So if they do that, just flip them back. You want to make sure that that curved edge of the crescent is sitting across the top of your circle. So I've now got to continue on, moving from left to right through the delica that I've just added. So I'll show you that one more time. Your crescent bead goes on first and pulls into place. Then you pick up 111 delica, move through the next bead from your circle, going from right to left. Pull everything in tight and make sure your crescent is in place, and then go through the delica you've just added, moving from left to right to make that square stitch thread path. So you're going to continue to do that all the way around the rest of the circle. That should add in all 18 of your crescent beads. I'm actually going to come off video here and complete mine, but I will just come back and show you what happens as we add the last bead. So I suggest that you pause here and you can continue to add in this row on your own work and then come back and join me to see what happens next. Right, I've made it all the way around my circle now. I've just got my final crescent bead to add in. So that's very simple. Again, just popping it on the needle, making sure it's going to sit the right way round. We don't have to add in any new size 11 delicas at this point. You're just going to continue on through the first of the 11 delicas that you've already got in place. Make sure that your last crescent is sitting the right way and then pull your thread tight. Now at this point everything is going to be quite floppy, so what you want to do now is pass through all the beads from that row one more time, and you're going to pull them in really tight. So you might pass through them one at a time, or you might manage to get your needle through several in one go, as I've been doing. Just take care if you are passing through lots of beads at once. It's easy to just accidentally skip a bead, and if you do that you'll end up with thread showing around the outside of that bead, which won't look great. Also just watch out, because the shape of the crescent beads does lend itself to catching thread. So as you're pulling in each time, make sure that your thread really has pulled in without catching around anything. Now I'm almost back where I started. I know this because it was right next to my tail thread. Incidentally, I've left the tail thread because I may want to use it again later on. But if it's really getting in the way, you can always cut it off. Make sure you've secured it first, of course. So that's got me all the way around. I've pulled in tight, and that's pulled my crescents in so they're sort of sitting nicely snuggled over the edge of the rivoli. The next step is to add in the Paisley dero beads. So we're going to step up by passing through the other hole of the crescent bead that I'm exiting. And in doing that, I'm going to change my direction of travel. So I'm actually just going to pause here and let you take stock and catch up so you get to the same point that I've reached. And then you can come back and I'll show you how to add in the Paisley duos next. Right, you should be exiting from the second hole, that was an empty hole, in your crescent bead. It's very simple thread paths from now on. The trick in this step is our Paisley duos are going to be sitting in pairs. So the first one we add, we want to sit so it's sort of curving outwards. So that means passing through the bottom hole, entering it from the concave side. So we've got that in place on the needle. We're going to pass through the empty hole of the next crescent bead. Pull that in tight. Now my next Paisley duo, I want to enter the opposite way around. So I'm going in from the convex side, still at the narrow end though, and just passing through the empty hole of the next crescent bead. Now in the third stitch, I want to add one of my size 11 delicas. Again, just passing through the second hole, the empty hole on the crescent. So now we repeat that again. You'll see, as I did with the crescent beads, I actually find it easiest to pick up my Paisley duos, sort of position them and then pass the needle through, and that way I know I'm going to end up with them sitting in the right alignment. So that's first Paisley duo, second Paisley duo from the pair, and you'll see they like to twist the thread around, so just make sure you untwist anything before you pull up tight. And the third stitch, we've got a delicate going in. So I'm just going to repeat that sequence all the way around the rest of the circle. Again, I'll take a little break here. You can do the same and get your beads in place on this row, and I will come back and show you what happens next. Well, I've got the rest of that row in place now, so before we continue I'm just going to quickly check that I didn't make any mistakes in the placement of my Paisley duos. No, I think those pairs all look fine. Now you can pass your needle and thread through all the beads in that row again to reinforce them if you want. If you have incredibly tight tension, that may not be a possibility for you. If your tension is very loose, then passing through everything again will help to pull things up tight. The only reason I suggest it is for extra stability, but it's absolutely not essential. So you want to end up making sure you're exiting from one of your Paisley duo beads. It doesn't matter which one, except that the first thing we're going to do is step up and pass through the second hole in that bead. So as you can see, my thread contrasts fairly well with the bead colour, and inevitably it's going to show on the step up. So it's really a matter of personal preference whether you prefer it showing on this inner curved side or the outer curved side. You decide which probably seems more subtle to you. So anyway, we're going to just pass straight through the second hole of that bead. And once again, that's going to change your direction of travel. So to keep things easy, I'm just flipping my work over. Final step is really simple. You're going to just add a pearl in each space around the row. So we're picking up a pearl, passing through the second hole of the next Paisley duo, the empty hole. And that's why it was so important for you to check that all the holes on your beads were free. I mean, you've seen it earlier on with the crescent beads in the last row. Imagine how frustrating it would have been to get part way around the row and find that you had a blocked hole that you just couldn't unblock. Same thing on this row. You don't really want to be in a position where you suddenly discover that one of the second holes on your Paisley duos is blocked. So while I'm reminding you about the importance of that practice when you're using 2-hole beads, I'm also working my way around the row. I don't think this really requires a lot of explanation. The hardest thing about it is actually probably chasing the pearls around the mat to get your needle through them. So I'm going to just finish this up off camera. you might want to take a pause and finish off your flower as well, and I will just come back in a second and talk about how we actually finish the project off. There we go, I've finished off my row, and all I've done to finish this off is pass my needle and thread through all of the beads in that row again. I like to go through definitely at least once. You can pass through more times than that if you've got enough thread and you can get the needle through. Once I've done that and I feel that the thread is secure, all I want to do is bring in my embroidery scissors or thread burner, and you just want to trim absolutely as close to the beads as possible. That's got rid of the working thread, and that is now ready to use and enjoy. Now if I turn it over, I've still got my tail thread attached here. So I've got options. You can build beadwork off the back side of this, and that's exactly what I've done in a few projects, which I'll show you in just a second. You could also just simply add a ring or stitch a little ring out of beads, and then this would make a very pretty pendant just suspended on a rope or a chain. You might actually want to attach 2 beaded ropes off the back of this and make a pendant that way. Or you might want to make several of these flower motifs and work out a way of joining them together to make a chain. They would look rather pretty around a wrist as a bracelet. Or you could join them together to make a focal section or an entire necklace. So really, loads and loads of options for this. And in fact, I'm just going to show you 2 of the ways in which I've developed my flowers into projects. So let's take a look at those next. What I've got here are a couple of projects that I've already made using this flower motif. So this is the pendant that you've seen me wearing on this video. I've basically taken 2 of my flowers and created a reversible pendant, so I've got 2 colourways to choose from. It was very simple to just create a backing working from the Rivoli and then join these together. Just add a bail and you've got quite a quick and easy project to try. Now, I mean, there's other options I could add here. I'm thinking maybe this would look nice with a couple of leaves, and I've got more ideas for other ways that I want to develop this floral theme to make a necklace. Also occurred to me that if you're someone who likes wearing statement earrings, these will actually work as a really stunning earring. They're not too heavy, and the reversible design is perfect for earrings. So perhaps that's something you'd like to try out. If you're not so much into jewellery, then how about a beaded box? This is very much in the style of a Grecian urn, so I've entitled it my flower urn box. As you can see, I've got the floral motifs all around the base of the box, and then another one on the lid, which if we lift that off you can see I've got the backing for that, and quite a big amount of storage space inside this box. So basically there's loads and loads of ways you can incorporate these lovely flower motifs. I'm sure there's lots of other things you can think of, and I'd love to see what you do with them. If you want to have a go at either of these 2 projects, then I do have patterns for them, and I've given you the links in the blog post, so make sure you check that out. And just a reminder, if there was anything on the video demonstration that wasn't entirely clear, or if you need a bit more information about the materials here, then again I've covered all of that in the blog post. So hopefully that's inspired you, hopefully given you a little project to keep you busy, and I'd love to hear what you make with your floral motifs. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning how to make that and seeing a few of the possibilities that you can create with it. Don't forget to check out the blog post. As I keep saying, that will give you a bit more help with the exact materials that you need. I've linked to places that you can buy them as well, and I've linked to technique help if you need any of that too. If you enjoyed this, then help out one of your beading buddies and share it with them. The more the merrier as far as making projects like this goes. And also I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. I'll be sharing more project videos like this. I also have videos teaching you basic beading techniques and just some fun beading stuff that showcases some of the bigger projects that I've made. So there's really plenty for you to watch. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you again for watching. I'll just leave you once more with the details of that blog that I keep talking about, and there's a link in the description down below too. So I hope you enjoy this, find some inspiration, and just stay safe and happy beading.